Hi, Matt.
Hi, Keeley. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Folks are just joining, so thanks for being on. Love your
Yeah,
background.
thanks. I think you guys made it for us.
Oh, how have you been?
Good. How about you?
Yeah, I've been keeping busy. Back to school. Our last first day
Yeah,
yesterday.
we started on Tuesday.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's your last first day. This is your youngest is in senior year. What?
I know.
No way.
Nuts, right?
Yeah. Holy cow. Is that Miriam?
Yeah, yep. And so it's crazy. I feel it. I feel that age, but um,
I like
but
your airplane propeller. A little
thank you.
nod to that. That's
Little
cool.
nod to the past. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was saying I was giving you time to say but you don't look it.
Oh,
So
sorry.
that's why I was kind of like leaving it open.
I'm like,
I
as you say it, I'm like, I feel it too. Like, I feel
no,
it
well, you
resonate.
don't look it,
Oh,
Keely.
thanks, Matt. Thanks, Matt. I feel like guys never age, though. Like, you guys
Oh,
always just stay the same.
well, uh I got a whole head of hair that says something different, but
But it's been short as long as I've known you. It's just short.
maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. We've got folks logging in. We tend to kind of start kind of a rolling start, but let's get our conversation underway, Keely, because what we do is we get a lot of hits on these conversations um, on our website and on YouTube as well, and then we also
Okay,
send them to practices when they need help with a certain thing or
cool.
another. As you know, well, and we'll get into a little bit, but I've pinged you for practice help before in the research realm, and so I think we're gonna have a nice discussion today. Um, so I just want to start out by saying practice habits exist to give back to the practice and industry leaders who have taught, challenged, and encouraged me throughout my career. Early on, learning in the Midwest, it could feel isolating and definitely alone, kind of in the Midwest out here, kind of like nobody's coming for you. And leadership can be lonely at times, and it definitely is. And that's why we created Practice Habits is to share best ideas, proven practices, and practical implementation methods. So practices and industry types can learn from all the mistakes that we've collectively made, I've made, and maybe accelerate their practice even more quickly. Now, today, I'm joined here by my friend Keeley Bover, and I don't want to dare say how long we've known each other, Keely, but a long time. And I remember when you first started, you came from Colorado and you joined us, and we're in the clinics. And then you quickly moved into a leadership role in the research team, and then went to a really critical role of really advising a lot of companies on how they could better do their research. And I mean, we had a good research program at Vance Thompson Vision before, but nothing like now. You really took it to the next level. And as clinics like Vance Thompson Vision and others grew, it became difficult, like all things. Okay, so this is a really nifty little piece of the organization over here under one roof, but how do you do it in Fargo and Bozeman and Billings? And what's the common thread that can help this part of the organization scale? And that's where you really just shined. You shined all the way through, but your ability to kind of transcend the day to day and figure out how to make this have mass appeal, I think, is really well, it's why we're talking to you today. It's what practices I think can learn the most about from you. And now you're at the helm, a founder and CEO of True North CRO. We're going to talk about that transition as well. But I think that's probably been 4 or 5 years since you started True North, and I think you have been not resting or sleeping since because everybody wants a higher standard in how they do research, both the clinics that do the research, but also the sponsors who try to coordinate and organize the research um, for all of us. So, everybody, this is Keely. Keely, maybe just do yourself justice and cover the things I left out. Defend yourself a little bit on your background and specialty.
No, I think you did it better than I could have ever dreamed, Matt. Thank you for that. So yeah, Keeley Boever, been in research for about 14 years now, been in eyes for over 20. Started out actually in a making and selling glasses. So started out with a really good optical background and understanding optics, and then just kind of progressed over the years. I'm a lifelong learner, but not a traditional lifelong learner. I love learning hands-on, and that's what clinic allowed me to do. And Vance Thompson Vision and UMAT and the doctors there, and then industry. And so I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to have helped start True North alongside my team. And I'm really happy to get to call the ophthalmology ecosystem home and family. And it's fun to go to conferences and see everyone that you know. And it feels like a reunion every time. And that's special in ophthalmology. So love it.
Well, I want to start with Keely. Nice, nice introduction, but I want to start from the beginning because you went in just a very short period of time from in clinic to seeing some things, reading the tea leaves, getting into research, seeing the tea leaves, improving upon research, seeing how this can help the other sites as they're growing. Research at now soon to be 10 sites, and then all the way to this should be better across the country. Give us the story in your words of how True North was born. What niche is it filling?
Yeah, so I come at it from a clinical perspective, and my counterpart, Travis Holman, came at it. He was our number two right behind me. He came at it from a sponsor side. So we kind of meshed and gave a great perspective. But in clinic, I was hearing and I was seeing where we'd have companies that would come in and bring in a CRO or a monitor that didn't know what an ETDRS box is. And for those of you that don't know what that is, that's how you measure vision in clinical research trials. And so we would have to spend some time teaching them, but they were supposed to be our resource and teaching us. And so it felt like, gosh, there could be a better way. And I'm a big believer in if you're going to complain about something, you should be a solution, not a complainer. And so that's a little bit of how True North was born. And then I have some other co-founders with me, Dr. John Bertall and Dr. Vance Thompson, and they've started a few companies or advised a few companies, a few, right? And they were hearing a lot of chatter about how expensive it was to run clinical trials, and when you have a small startup, they don't have unlimited piggy banks, and if things go over budget, it's really hard on them, and to the tune of they could shut down because of it. And so Dr. Bertol had personally experienced some of that with his goggles that he tried to take to FDA, and then ultimately we took him to FDA panel and the support there. And so we were getting more and more companies coming into Vance Thompson Vision that weren't ready to hire a big CRO and they didn't have the money to. So they were asking us to help file with the FDA and run the process for first in human in the US. And we did it. I was very, very lucky that Dr. Bertall and Dr. Thompson had a lot of faith in me, and they were like, "Well, Keely can help," and I was like, "All right, well, I can read FDA guidance. I can dive into this," and I've always liked learning, like I said, so I got the opportunity to help with that. And after a few FDA submissions and getting going on that, we thought, "Hey, we've had enough companies that have come to us now and asked for help. There's maybe something." Missing there. And there are a ton of great other ophthalmology specific CROs on the market. And we're not trying to take their place. We're just trying to fill a different area where it's smaller, needs more help, doesn't know ophthalmology as well, needs more hand holding there. And so that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So the difference between your CRO and the others. Get to the brass tacks of how you're in a category that's really uncontested.
Yeah, so we'll only hire people with ophthalmology experience, um, which is a big difference, I think, for sites. We are good at knowing glaucoma in depth. We can read visual fields. We can help review inclusion, exclusion because we've sat there. We have clinicians that work for us. We have a couple ODs that are on our team. So that's helpful to have that in-house. And then we have access to a ton of great ophthalmologists when we don't know. but our team really dives into have they've been in the chair of the coordinator so that we can anticipate the questions that they're going to ask and hopefully not let them step in it. You know, you talked about practices in the Midwest and being a leader and feeling like sometimes you're on an island. I remember when I started in research as a coordinator, we had a great research team, but it often felt like you were on an island. You don't know what you don't know, and research is always changing. And every time you start a new study, after a couple patients, you start to get the flow and you start to understand it, and you think, okay, I got this. I can see these patients and whip through them. And then the study's over and enrollment's closed and you're on to the next. And you're learning all over again and you're feeling uncomfortable all over again and trying not to step in it. So after you've seen about 100 and something clinical trials like I have, and my team has seen even more, we can start to anticipate what would be the step in it and how to help avoid that and help hopefully make the sites have a better experience.
Yeah, and so you stand between the sponsoring organization, who's really at, like you mentioned, they're at a fragile stage in their company, and they're like all companies, very budget conscious, but also they usually have a burn rate month by month of what they're spending before they just flat out run out of money.
Mhm.
And yet they have to get into the clinic, get clinical data from the product or offering that they have, get it out and measurable in order to submit to the FDA or others, depending on where it is in its life cycle, the offering, and yet do it without offending any kind of clinical personnel, or making sure the clinical personnel are awesome, because bad data equals bad outcome for company. And so you're really the one kind of, I mean, you really have two clients, right? Because
Mhm.
you're also wanting to nurture that clinic relationship, so they're excited to raise their hand and when, be excited when they see your team coming. How am I doing?
Yep, that's that's great. And then we're also tiptoeing the line of the sponsor wants every piece of data they could ever get because this is their shot at it and they're paying for it. So they want to gather as much as they can. And we're trying to reel them back in on what are your primary endpoints, what are secondary, what are safety. And let's just focus on those. And then you can do a post market or an investigator initiated or something else down the road, but let's keep focusing on what your goal is. Your goal is to just get this product to market and make sure it's safe and effective. And so reeling them back in a delicate way, because their marketing team is in the background saying, but we want to know this. And every piece of extra data that you gather puts you at risk for an approval, and timelines and cost. So we tiptoe with that. And then they always want it faster. And the sites want to know why are they being pushed on for faster enrollment. And so explaining there's a cash burn rate with the sponsor, and that's something that we focus on a lot is telling the sites the why behind everything, and helping to share even there's a whole list of FDA guidance documents and ISO guidance documents, ANSI standards, and sharing those more, which I wish when I was at the clinic would have been shared more with me to understand the why. I remember looking at an IOL or intraocular lens protocol and thinking, man, I've seen this before. Every sponsor, do they just copy each other's work? What is going on here? These all look the same. Well, it turns out that there's an ISO guideline that gives you a playbook of exactly how to write that protocol and what needs to be in it. So, yes, they all look the same. And if they don't, there's a problem because you're probably not going to meet the endpoints.
Yeah, you're and definitely not compliant. I
Yes.
remember, far way before you came to the organization, one of our doctors, our founding Dr. Vance, he said that research was the lifeblood of improvement, and yet a lot of times a big money loser. Um, and I think that that was true back then, though we didn't, classically track it as good as it's being tracked now, mostly because they had kind of a hack job as an administrator back then. But, but Talk to us about whether or not can research be a profitable part of a program. That's not why you started, but
Mhm.
can it be done efficiently? And then how does it get done efficiently? Because you can certainly lose your hat doing it as well.
Yeah, so I like to say that, you don't do a clinic doesn't necessarily do research to make money, or our clinic didn't do research to make money. But you're not going to have a business if you're losing money, and people aren't going to be motivated unless there's a profit for them or a higher good for them, which research can be both. You can feel like you're giving back to future generations, which you are, and you're giving them better care. And that's awesome because hey, we're going to have some of the best IOLs you could ever hope for. And I'm really excited about those. And I know that if I were to get glaucoma, there's so many options that could help me prevent me from going blind. Um, but you also want to toe that line of it being a benefit for your clinic. So it's not a distraction, it is a benefit. And we were able to make it successful at Vance Thompson Vision through working on budgets with sponsors and realizing our value and our worth. And turns out if you enroll well and fast and you follow the protocol well, that gets everybody to their goals faster, which is a faster approval, which then only makes sense for you to be compensated fairly because the faster it gets to market, the less they're spending on research, the more time they have to sell the product or drug while it's still on patent before somebody else can come in and do the same thing. And so it's good for everyone. And then you're able to leverage that if you're a really good clinical site with being able to make it more profitable.
I want to talk about, oh, and I was hoping you would go where you did because I remember spending a lot of time with you with budgets, right? We had never really negotiated budgets before, or talked much with them. We sponsors would come to us with studies, and here was the budget, and here's all the work that had to be done within the protocol, and the answer was yes. Now what's the question? And um, and we really learned, I'll say together, but really driven by you, that we should slow our roll. We should determine what each minute, what each 15 minutes, what time in the clinic, what time with a particular diagnostic should be worth by backing into what it is for our regular patient types. And then making sure that we're not getting, I mean, we shouldn't be, charging less
Mhm.
for this to sponsors. And I will say just basically as a rule of thumb, and clearly I never measured, but I'll bet we were 40% shy on budgets before you really started to scrutinize them. And it was really helpful to go through the exercise where budgets then became more healthy, clinic to sponsor. That also creates some opportunity for you as a CRO as well.
Mhm. Yeah. So we always go to bat for the site. I would say, as a CEO and leader, that's probably my weak point is I would always probably take less to know that the site's gonna make more so that we can enroll faster, which then gives us a better reputation. And hopefully that earns value. And then next time it's known that, hey, everybody should be able to be more successful because it's going to make the project successful if the sites are paid well. And that's going to get us all rowing in the same direction. Um, so I'm a big site girl. I like to push for the sites and push for a fair budget for them. Because if they don't get compensated fairly, my fear is they won't be around. And there's already not enough good research sites. It's an afterthought for a lot of clinics, or they're not negotiating budgets appropriately or being compensated fairly enough to have enough staff to turn the data around like we want to see it and have it input into the database or enroll the amount of patients. So I think you get what you pay for, just like with
Hmm.
anything, and compensating the sites fairly really does that. Now, being on the CRO side, it's a different perspective. We have several clients that are partners that are smaller startup companies and they don't have an unlimited piggy bank. They are really stretched to make this work. And they have one shot to get it to market, and they got to do it quickly before they run out of money. And every dollar that more that they pay the sites kind of gives them a shorter and shorter runway. So I think it's really important to mention that everybody needs to be fair to each other. If you're going to request a higher budget, you got to deliver on that because you're taking away from that runway that they have to stay funded. And then from the sponsor perspective, it's just we want to be fair, but we sometimes just might not have it. Like, and that's
Hmm.
the bottom line. So it's a delicate balance sitting in this chair.
Yeah, I can see that. We've got a lot of practices on the line, or folks who will eventually watch this as well. I'd like you to talk to us about what the ideal practice is to consider clinical research. What do they have going for them that make them an attractive site for True North?
Yeah, so one of our best new practices has been more of a role practice, because they have a larger catchment area and they're newer to research. I actually like the sites that are newer to research right now. I love our oldies. They're great. But some of them are retiring or stepping away, or they've got bought out by PE and they don't understand research yet, so they're kind of stopping. So our new sites, they've been fun and scrappy, and they don't always have the same treatment rate that the older sites have had. So you need both, right? The new sites, we found they might not have as many MIGs being implanted as some of the older sites. They weren't the very first ones to get the eye dose or the very first ones to get the eye stent. So they have a bigger patient population. They haven't drained that bathtub yet. So they've been fun to bring on and foster. And they're new, excited, and hungry, which has been great. And then our old sites, we have those relationships already. So we continue to foster them. They're doing great for us. They're steady. Um, but they've both been great. And the new ones have been fun because I like feeling like I get to help people, and helping those new sites is fun. Um,
Well, and you're exactly right. We're retiring just as many doctors as we're having join forces with us, actually at a greater rate. And so you have to be backfilling your capacity that way. So, one thing you just mentioned is a good site criteria would be um, an ability and willingness to get the work turned around,
mhm.
right? Oldie or new, but you kind of like the hungry one. So that's a good quality. What's another quality that a practice needs to have?
So I found that if a practice is incentivizing the ODs that are in that practice or even the coordinators, it's helpful. I mean, every surgeon that I know works on production pretty much. It's silly to think that that wouldn't motivate others. So the sites that are willing to say to the ODs, hey, you're going to be a sub-investigator on this. You're going to help me. I need you. I need your help, so you're going to get a part of the budget for the study. That only makes sense. It's not just one extra thing on their plate, it's an opportunity for them, just like most of the time when they convert a premium IOL patient. That's an extra opportunity for them. And then to recognize them and take them along to the national meetings or the investigator meetings and showcase those doctors that are really doing the work. Same with the coordinator, it all rolls down. Incentivizing those coordinators a little bit on, is their data clean? Are they responding to emails in a timely manner? Are they getting a good survey rating from the sponsor, which you can send out surveys to sponsors or CROs? Hey, how's my site doing? Are they meeting the enrollment goals that they said that they'd meet with the sponsor? And so incentivizing them really gets everybody rowing in the same direction. And it doesn't have to be a big lift for the practice. Like I said, you're already getting that budget. So breaking off a portion of that to those roles is really, really helpful. And those are definitely my favorite practices to work with because they get it and
Yeah.
they're going to do a great job because incentives are aligned.
It's interesting. I couldn't agree more. That being said, I want to make sure that for our listeners that They understand the nuance between internal ODs who are part of the research program, or
Mhm.
external ODs who are also referring other maybe insurance-based cases. It's really the former that
Mhm.
we're talking about. And
They're employees of the clinic.
yeah,
They
exactly.
are, yes, being paid their whole salary by the clinic.
Yep. The other thing though is and I've seen this from you and your team and also the doctors that we both work with. Um, they do want the OD community outside the organization to know what studies are going on because they'll run across these patients too.
Hmm.
And while in a classic collaborative care environment, I might be referred by my optometrist to a doctor for my cataract care, for example. I would choose to go back to my primary eye care provider who
Hmm.
referred me. But in this case, many times I would need to, if it was research, I would need to stay with the surgeon's practice and be followed up by that surgeon or that OD. So that message is sophisticated, telling, it's one of the only times where we're saying to an OD community, hey, we want you to refer patients if you see them because it'll help. It's for the good of the whole. For the life of the study, they're probably going to remain with us.
Hmm.
And that becomes it's not even nuance. We've had to be really clear about that, but the ODs have to know that they're part of the long game.
Yeah,
And
so I've got to experience that quite a bit on the site side and how to delicately balance that. Sometimes in a glaucoma study, they miss their patient for 3 years and they
mm,
miss seeing them every 6 months for 3 years. And for a smaller OD practice, that's a lot. That's a patient that they lose. And it's a relationship, that is their patient. They care for them. In research, we oftentimes say, you can still go back to your referring OD for glasses, prescriptions. We would encourage you to go back for that. And then we make sure we communicate with that referring OD. We tell them, we send a letter saying that your patient's been enrolled in this study. Here's everything about the study. We oftentimes, in a consent form for research, ask if the patient wants their referring OD to be told that they're in a study and updated on their progress. And almost always the patients say yes. So then we send progress notes throughout. If it's a masked study, which in other indications you would call blinded, but in research, in ophthalmology, we don't use the word blind ever, so
never.
it's called masked. If it's a masked study, we don't tell the OD what they got. And we do tell them, hey, if you see something in their eye, like an eye dose, for example, don't tell them. You can't tell them that you saw that. The patient doesn't know. So that's important to really communicate with them. But then we'll have things where it's educational meetings and dinners where we educate the doctor on those studies. We send out newsletters quarterly on what studies we're doing. And then personally, I think a couple dozen of the community ODs had my cell phone number where they would call me and ask me about studies. And they actually started to enjoy it. So it was changing the perception of losing your patients to the perception of the reality actually of you're giving your patient a better option. Um, and you're creating better options for other patients in your practice. So one of our local ODs that I remember, shout out to Dr. Seiler, would have calls with me a lot. And I remember him even calling me and being like, Keely, my neighbor would love a premium IOL, but she can't afford it. I want to put her in your study. Okay, send her on over. Let's see if she qualifies. And so that's a great opportunity. Or, hey, we have had patients that are maybe a little underserved. They can't afford care as much. They don't have insurance. I remember one that had just got unfortunately released from an unfortunate circumstance and they didn't have insurance. Well, research can help with that. And so the ODs would say, hey, you can help my patient. They need cross-linking and they can't pay for it. That was my absolute favorite study is when cross-linking had just got approved, but insurance wasn't covering it yet. And we had a huge backlog of patients that we know this treatment can help. Well, we were lucky enough to have a study during that time to help bridge that gap between when it was commercially available and insurance approved it. And so we could treat patients that desperately needed it but couldn't afford it. So it can be beautiful for that too.
Yeah, I think it's good all around for that. I think, The take home message with this is if you're a practice and you want to have your finger on the pulse of what's coming in the future, if you feel like you're a little overwhelmed with some of the what can become mundane in your practice, but you've got access to a lot of patients. If you've got a team that you really want to improve the way they look at their own professionalism in the craft, chances are research might be a good opportunity for you to kind of light the fire. One of the things I love about the research team is they are the least comfortable. I mean, every new study is going to totally change how they do their work. What a great posture, right? To
Mhm.
know that every day, like it's almost like the Navy SEALs of the technicians. I remember talking to you about that because they have to know everything that a technician knows, but they're only going to use some of it for this study, and they have to know why they're looking for it or why they're going to, not kind of mask themselves from certain data. That they have to be with it. And
Mhm.
as somebody who wants to know what my future looks like in an organization, that would be really attractive to me. So there's all kinds of benefits, not the least of which is how it helps our fellow human, and then it can be a part of your program that isn't necessarily the most profitable, but isn't a lost leader, and it comes with a lot of satisfaction. Keeley, we talk for about a half an hour on these sessions, and then we open up the conversation to people who have joined us and call in. And so, folks on the line, I'm going to let you unmute and ask questions if you'd like to. But the other thing that I'll do, and kind of my last question for you, Keeley, is what do you wish you would have done differently in two roles? Okay, when you were running the research within a clinic. What's one thing you wish you would have changed and done more quickly than you did?
Mhm. That's easy. I wish I wouldn't have been so afraid at the beginning, probably. Um, so I started to eventually tell my team, guys, it's going to be okay. It's always going to be okay. We just got to figure out how we're going to get there because you're gonna make mistakes in research. It's the first time that you're ever doing something. And that's terrifying at the beginning. And when clinic is so different than research. And like, I was lucky to have you and Dr. Birdall and Dr. Thompson, and you guys always made me feel secure and like I was never going to get in like trouble for anything. And I could always be honest with you guys with what was going on, but you still don't want to disappoint people or disappoint the sponsor. So just realizing like it's always going to be okay, just reach out to your resources and ask questions and be honest. And so I wish I would have done that differently, not been so
Yeah,
afraid at the beginning.
that's good. And it's the last thing I would have said about you because you you have never come across like you had anything other than complete confidence. So that's great.
You
That's a
fake
great
it till you
answer.
make it, Matt.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The second thing is what would you do differently as you were starting a CRO? What could you have done better?
Gosh, I feel like I'm still learning every day, right? Like that's hopefully I get to continue to learn every day for the rest of my career, which is why I love research and changing roles. Oh, honestly, I don't know. Like I my team is fantastic. I have surrounded myself with people that are much smarter than I am, so I check that off as a win. Um, I have great sponsor partners. I have great doctor partners. Something different as a CRO.
Hmm.
I don't know. I mean, it's
Yeah,
hard work and there's things that like struggles that come up every day, right? But so far I feel really supported by my team, sponsors, doctors, and I'm so proud of our team that I can't think of anything that I would change about them or what we're doing necessarily.
got it. Any questions from the field? And no problem if there isn't any. I've got one more, Keely, before we try to sign off here. But I want to know, or mostly it's a statement, and it's really one that I want you to hear, and that I don't mind having stuck on a website somewhere and living into perpetuity. But we both kind of officially left Vance Thompson Vision about the same time to go do our new thing, and years later, and it hasn't been that long, but a couple years later. I ended up talking to a little company in Spain that's doing a little something, that's thinking about how to get their work done, and you know, we're at ESCRS, and next thing you know, they're talking about you, and then later I see you at that meeting in Barcelona, and I just find it so joyful that like from our little spot, a few offices away from one another, we'll go all the way around the world in our own way, with our own kind of passions, and find ourselves right back at the same table again, with our own kind of subspecialty. And what an honor. And
Mhm.
I hope you look at it that way because you're doing really good work. And I hope our doctors that really mentored us feel that way too, because it's really what a great testament to them letting their team members run at
Yeah,
speed. So,
I couldn't have said it better, Matt. I completely agree. And I think it is a testament to our doctors that let us dream and run and nurtured our curiosity and our fire.
yeah, yeah. Well, good job at what you're doing. Keep doing it. We should talk about Academy. Love to be at some joint sessions with you or
Yeah.
co-sponsor some stuff. We have a lot of the same friends, and we're always proud of what you're doing. And reach out anytime. We look forward to having you back as you have more success, Keely.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me. Talk soon.
You bet. And everybody, that's why we created Practice Habits is to share stories like this. And hopefully you learned a little more so on how you might apply research to your program. Next week, we're talking about really the most important resource you have on your team, and that's the role of the team member themselves. How do you keep them motivated? How do you keep them you know, excited and trained and make them the best in class? And then just how do you keep them in general? And so that's going to be a really good conversation next week. There'll be a lot of celebratory stories and maybe even sharing some things that could have been done better along the way. So all about human talent and human resources and strengths next week. Thanks for joining Practice Habits, everybody. Thanks,
Thanks.
Keely.
Bye.